Hi, it's Chrissy Miles, and you're watching The Chrissy Miles Show, where I teach you how to take eternal truth and produce extreme results. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to run the race that's marked out for you. You know, it's easy to get distracted these days by all the options that we have available to us. It wasn't long ago that people kind of knew what they were good at, they specialized in it, they made a living out of it, and they built their lives out of doing the one thing that they were good at and that they loved. But nowadays, it seems like everyone is an expert in so many things, and sometimes it feels like we're not an expert in anything, and it gets easy to lose focus and lose track of who you are, what you were created to do. So I want to teach you how to stay in your lane and learn to run your own race. But first, subscribe to this channel and click the bell to get notified of more of my proven methods to get more out of life. Let's get started. Here's step number 1. Understand that you were made for a purpose. Jeremiah 1:5 says this, "Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you, I chose you, and before you were born, I set you apart." You know, this is a very famous passage of scripture, especially for a mother with a newborn. But if you yourself have never really understood or internalized that you were made for a purpose, you're going to have a really difficult time running a race that was marked out for you. You know, also in Exodus chapter 23, when God was calling the Israelites from Egypt into their promised land, he told them that he would fulfill the number of their days. And that fulfillment basically means that he knows the span or the age of your reign in this life, and that he would fulfill it, meaning that he would make it full. And so the key to understanding that you have a race to run is understanding that you have a purpose on this life. You were created for something. You were born to run a race that was marked out for you, and God promises you that he will fulfill the number of your days, meaning that you can rest assured that his promise for you is to complete everything that he has for you to do in your life so that you can live a life that's pleasing to him and also a life that's enjoyable for yourself. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever struggled wondering what your purpose is? I know I did at one point in life. So let me know in the comments below if you're struggling to try to find what your purpose is. Here's step number 2. Don't be persuaded by well-intentioned people. You know, Paul talks about a story in Galatians chapter 5 of people who were coming into the new church there, and they were trying to convince the Christians that they should continue living by all of the precepts of the law while also adopting everything that they had just learned about Jesus. And he writes to them in Galatians 5 chapter 1, and he says, listen, you became free when you accepted the word that Jesus had for you. And so he encourages them to stand firm and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. When you are trying to follow your dreams and your purpose in your life, you will have a lot of people come alongside you who are well-intentioned in the same way that the Jews back in this day were well-intentioned. They didn't want the Christians, the new Christians, to be getting so far away from all of the precepts of God that they had held onto traditionally for thousands of years. They had good intentions. But you see, Paul warned them and said, listen, God is doing a new thing. Christ came to set you free. And when you are pursuing your dream, you have a path that you're going down. You have a purpose for your life. And well-intentioned people have the tendency to come by out of a good heart, good nature, trying to prevent you from experiencing problems. But they have the tendency to burden you down with a list of obligations that they feel compelled to live by, but that might not be the plan for your life. So Paul warns us, and he also admonishes us to stand firm in the freedom that you have. And in this case, I believe you could also say stand firm in the purpose for your life and don't let well-intentioned people drag you down. Also in this passage in verse 7, Paul says, you were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. So what Paul is really talking about here is a couple of things. First of all, when you listen to the voice of God in your life and you begin running a race that's marked out for you, you have to stay focused on that and you have to only listen to him. Good people will come by you and they'll try to give you a lot of advice based upon their own experiences. But if that's not the truth that God has spoken to you about the direction for your life, then you can't be persuaded by what they're saying, even though it could be people who have a really meaningful role in your life, your parents, your spouse, maybe a brother, a sister. All of these people want the best for you, but the reality is that you have a race that you are called to run by yourself, and we are not to let anyone cut in on that race, even if they're the closest people in our lives. When they're trying to persuade us of not doing something because of their own experiences, or that we should do something different because of their own opinions, Paul writes and he says that kind of persuasion doesn't really come from the one who's called you. Here's step number 3. You have to learn how to narrow your focus, specifically to the most important thing. Now, it's easy to think that you're focused in on one thing specifically, but like I said earlier, a lot of times people are focusing on goals. They think that in their focusing on their goals, it's going to get them to their destination. But you see, there's a deeper meaning to life besides just what you can produce or what you can achieve. And Paul talks about this concept in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and he says this. He says, when I came to you, I didn't really come with a lot of eloquence or wisdom that I was proclaiming, meaning that I am known to maybe talk and write about a lot of things, but I set all of those things aside in order to simply give you the most focused piece of information that I could possibly give you. And he says that is Christ and Him crucified. You see, our lives can be about many, many different things, but if you want to stay in your race, you have to narrow your focus on the most important thing. Now, I have some personal opinions about what that should be if you're a Christian, and you could certainly learn for yourself of the things like becoming a disciple, learning how to make disciples, focusing your life on Jesus, but there's going to be a spiritual component to narrowing your focus in the same way what Paul was saying here. I have said that I know nothing except for Jesus Christ and Him crucified. If you look at Paul's writings, the irony is he knew a lot more than that. He knew a lot about the law and how the Old Testament pointed to the person of Jesus and how it verified Jesus was the Messiah. And all of these things that Paul knew, he actually said that when he was coming to the Corinthian church, he was going to narrow down his focus to the most important thing that he felt that he needed to share at that point in his life. And that was the story about how Jesus Christ was crucified. Now, in your life, that might look like a lot of different things. Maybe in your life, you're focusing on a real estate business, but your mind is a little bit scattered and you've been doing a little bit of everything. Narrow your focus. What part of your business that you're running is the best, most important thing that you could be focusing your attention on? The same is true if you're a leader in a corporation. Sometimes leaders get started in their small business and they start their corporations because they're great at sales. So narrow your focus. What's the most important thing that you can be doing in order to work toward your goals? This is how you're going to keep running your race and staying in the lane that was marked out for you. Here's step number 4. Don't compare yourselves to others. In another letter to the Corinthian church, Paul writes and he asks them to be cognizant of the fact that you don't live in the flesh. So what that means is that you'll have a tendency to look at the outward things in life. We all do. And we have a tendency to compare ourselves to other people based upon everything that's outwardly focused. So he says, listen, there's a war that's going on in our minds, and therefore you have to wage war against those things that are going on in your mind with a different type of tool. So he then goes on to talk about taking our thoughts captive, making them obedient to Christ, and so forth. So don't look at outward appearances. This is not what's going to help you run your race. And it's so easy to get distracted today by what we see on social media, what we see in the news, and we compare ourselves to what other people are doing with their lives. And that's the surefire way to stop running your race and try to get into the lane of someone else. Don't classify or compare yourself with somebody else. When you measure yourself by them and compare yourself with them, the Bible teaches that we're really just ignorant, not realizing that we're all created differently. We're all created with a unique purpose, so it doesn't make sense to compare yourself to someone else. For more tips on running the race marked out for you, I'd like for you to download my free MP3 called Living a Missional Life. It's where I'm going to teach you how to live a life that's on purpose and with mission. So follow the link in the description. Here's step number 5. Run your race to win. Also in the Corinthian letters, Paul says this in chapter 9, verse 24. He says, "Don't you know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way as to take the prize. Everyone who competes in the games trains with strict discipline. They do it for a crown that's perishable, but we do it for a crown that's imperishable. Therefore, I don't run aimlessly. I don't fight like I'm beating against the air." He says, "I discipline my body. I make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified." So let me read this story to you again from the Message translation. It's a very unique translation. So Paul says this. He says, "You've all been to the stadium and seen the athletes race. Everyone runs, but only one wins. Run to win. All good athletes train hard. They do it for a gold medal that tarnishes and fades. You're after one that's gold eternally. I don't know about you, but I'm running hard for the finish line. I'm giving it everything I've got. No sloppy living for me. I'm staying alert and in top condition. I'm not going to get caught napping, telling everyone else all about it, and then missing out myself." You see, if you want to run your race to win, you have to run hard for the finish line. And it's not about training for an earthly objective. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make, and Christians fall into that trap as well. We get so tied into accomplishing things, gaining more assets, moving on into the next level in life, not realizing that what's the point of it all in the end? If you die with a nice house and a bunch of cars and a bunch of money in the bank, you're still going to the grave with nothing. We all end up that way. And so Paul is admonishing us, listen, don't live sloppy. Stay alert and in top condition, and don't get caught napping, meaning that there's an end to this whole life. There's an end to this whole game. And you don't want to be the one who was sleeping on the job and not realizing it until later, missing out on everything your life could have been about. So run the race to win, which means that you're focusing on spiritual things first as a priority. It doesn't mean that other physical things aren't important, but it means that we have a spiritual importance to our life. And when we run a race in that way, then you're not going to miss out on what the future has to hold. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed these tips about how to run the race marked out for you. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, and if you know someone who's consistently getting off track and going nowhere, share this video with them. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe to this channel for new episodes each Tuesday where I teach you how to get more out of life. Thanks for watching.